This better be recording, and if I don't think my face looks that bad. Alright, whatever. This light is really really bright. Hopefully my room is clean, I think, at least from what you can see. Can you see Toothless? Hope you can see him. Wait, you can't see him. Before I get started, a quick summary of what this video is about. It's going to be about the power of judicial review. Oh, speaking of, I should probably pull up my notes from my law class. Speaking of law, quick shout out to Professor Harris for assigning this an essay assignment. So this is my third time filming this video, because the first time I filmed it, I went on and on about, the cases I'm going to be discussing. I did some thorough investigation regarding those cases. And when I decided to stop the camera so I could see where I was at, I realized absolutely none of it recorded. I was devastated. I was livid. I was astounded at how dumb I am. Anyway, so I gave up. This happened last night. Right now it's 3:30 on the dot p.m. It's Thursday. So the first time I filmed it was yesterday, Wednesday. And that was when I realized that I wasn't actually filming. I was mad. I called my mom. She was like, it's fine. Like, it was something probably happened. Like, it wasn't turning out good. It happened for a reason. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. And so instead of filming again, trying to film it again, I just put in a movie and went to bed. I wasn't about to deal with it again. And the second time I filmed it, or the first time, I guess, I did it this morning in my kitchen. Again, I went through a thorough discussion on the topic. It took me about an hour, just talking about everything. Then I went to go edit it, and the lighting was just so bad. I wasn't even like in camera half the time. I don't know why I wasn't like aware of where I was sitting compared to the camera, but I'm dumb. Can you hear the Christmas music? I have Mariah Carey playing on right now. So I filmed it and I was trying to edit it, and then it looked so bad. I realized that I could not look at myself like this. So here I am for the third time. Hopefully this will work for sure this time. The lighting should be a lot better. I have a mirror up there. I can see myself, and it looks. You might hear some noises here and there. I have a ghost living with me in my apartment, or at least I'm convinced. A couple weeks ago, my roommate moved out of the blue. Didn't tell me about it. And I'm convinced that she moved out because of the ghost haunting her room, or her old room now. So I have yet to actually see the ghost, but whenever I hear like something drop, or like I hear something in the kitchen or something in the bathroom, I know it's. I named him Landon, so I know it's Landon making those noises, trying to be a goof. Such a goof. I picture a young Liam Payne when I picture Landon. A funny guy. So now that we have gotten thoroughly off topic, did I talk about what this video is going to be about? I can't remember. If I haven't, the video is going to be about the power of judicial review. That's what I will be discussing. Basically what judicial review is is the power of like the higher courts in hearing cases that have been already decided by lower courts and deciding whether they follow the Constitution or whether they ruled it bad, they ruled it wrong, and answering any constitutional questions. So, but if you don't believe me, I'm just gonna read the definition I have from my notes. So, power of judicial review, as defined by Professor Harris, is the power to review statutes to decide if they conform to the federal or state constitution. There you have it. We will be looking at three cases that have to do with judicial review. So I'm gonna be using Westlaw for all of these. The first case we'll be looking at is Marbury versus Madison. This is like the first case that actually resulted in the creation of the judicial review idea, created by the Supreme Court of 1803 or the early 1800s. All right, let's get to it. Okay, so the first case I'll be looking at is Marbury versus Madison. So a quick historical background on what was going on at the time. This takes place in the early 1800s, I think. It's actually 1800 on the dot. Love water. Except when it tries to kill you. So this takes place in 1800. It was during the presidential election. The race was between Thomas Jefferson and John Adams. John Adams was the president at the time, and Thomas Jefferson ended up winning the 1800 election. So before Thomas Jefferson took office in March 1801, John Adams he was kind of petty, not gonna lie, but in order to kind of cause Thomas Jefferson some problems, he starts appointing circuit judges and justices of the peace. Kind of just doing this and telling Thomas Jefferson, like, hey, now it's your problem, stuff like that. All the appointees were approved by the Senate, but they weren't valid until their commission was delivered by the Secretary of State at the time, who was James Madison. William Marbury, he was appointed Justice of the Peace in the District of Columbia. But his commission wasn't delivered. That was because Thomas Jefferson told James Madison not to deliver it. So then this is where the case starts to kind of go in. So William Marbury went to the Supreme Court directly and asked for a writ of mandamus in order to force James Madison to deliver the commission. If you don't know what a mandamus is, I'm just going to define it here. It's a judicial writ issued as a command to an inferior court or ordering a person to perform a public or statutory duty. So basically what he was asking was for the court to force James Madison to deliver the letters. Court case, on the first paragraph, it states, quote, "The Supreme Court of the United States has not power to issue a mandamus to a Secretary of State of the United States, it being an exercise of original jurisdiction now warranted by the Constitution. Congress have not power to give original jurisdiction to the Supreme Court in other cases than those described in the Constitution. An act of Congress repugnant to the Constitution cannot become a law. The courts of the United States are bound to take notice of the Constitution. A commission is not necessary to the appointment of an officer by the executive. A commission is only evidence of the appointment. Delivery is not necessary to the validity of letters patent. The President cannot authorize a Secretary of State to omit the performance of those duties which are enjoined by law." End quote. The court found that the refusal from James Madison to deliver the commission was illegal, but they weren't allowed to force him to do it. And they also found that the fact that Marbury went directly to them to ask for a writ of mandamus was also illegal. It was unconstitutional because it extended, or it went past, the court's jurisdiction given to them by the Constitution. So in the paragraph that I just read, it uses the phrase original jurisdiction, and that's usually typically compared with appellate jurisdiction, so I'm just going to define what both of those mean. The original jurisdiction of a court is the power to hear a case for the first time, whereas appellate jurisdiction is the power of the higher court to review decisions and change outcomes of decisions of lower courts. So that's pretty much what we're talking about here. As a result, the Supreme Court at the time found that Congress did not have the power to modify the Constitution through regular legislation because Supremacy Clause places the Constitution before the law. So as a result, they came up with the power of judicial review, which is the power to declare law unconstitutional at that time. So that's where the judicial review all starts. They found that even though they were the Supreme Court, they didn't have any power given to them by the Constitution to do unconstitutional acts, which was what Marbury was asking them to do. Yeah. So that's the first case. Anyway, the next case we'll be looking at is Cohen's versus the state of Virginia. So this takes place 1821. So it's about 20 years after the last case we looked at, Marbury versus Madison. So this case, adding on to the idea of the power of judicial review, it kind of just expands that power, and I will get into why. So at the time, Congress had created the national lottery. But some states, there was a law that prohibited the sale of lottery tickets, and Virginia was one of those states. So two brothers, Philip and Mendez Cohen, they ran a business in Virginia. They were caught selling lottery tickets. They were quickly charged and tried in the state of Virginia, and they were found guilty, and they were each fined $100, which at the time was a good sum of money. I wish I had $100 now. Can't imagine what $100 was in 1821. The brothers appealed the decision to the Virginia State Supreme Court, and they were like, no, you're guilty. You got to pay the fine. That's that. Like, we're just going to leave the decision that was decided from the lower court. The brothers were still pretty upset about it. So then they just went directly to the United States Supreme Court, claiming that because in that Congress created the actual national lottery, that it trumps state law, which is prohibiting the sale of lottery tickets. When the U.S. Supreme Court first heard the case, they had to determine whether they had jurisdiction or not. And since Virginia was very adamant, saying that the decision stopped where they were, the justices asserted the superiority of federal law over state law. So basically, federal law trumps state law. Or federal law, as they interpreted, was the supreme law of the land. So once they decided that they did have jurisdiction over the case, they had to then decide whether to uphold the convictions of the Cohen brothers. In the end, the justices found that even though Congress did establish the national lottery, the state of Virginia still had the authority to prohibit the sale of lottery tickets within the boundaries of Virginia. When the justices voted, it was pretty much unanimous. They were like, yeah, you done goofed. You're still guilty. But The reason this case has to do with the power of judicial review is that it expanded the powers, also including that the Supreme Court had the authority to hear cases with constitutional questions, no matter who the parties are. And in this case, there was some controversy because one of the parties was the state of Virginia, and like it didn't matter who the parties were. If there was a constitutional question regarding the case, they had the authority and jurisdiction to hear it. So the next case we'll be looking at is Gideon versus Wainwright. This takes place March 18th, 1963, so about a century later from the other two cases we've looked into. Comparing to the other cases, this one doesn't really expand the judicial review powers. It just it explains how those powers have been put to use. So Gideon versus Wainwright, the background behind it. So Clarence Earl Gideon was charged with breaking and entering with the intention to commit a felony. No, to commit a misdemeanor, which is considered a felony in the state of Florida. He was arrested, obviously, and at trial, he appeared in front of the court and was like, "Hey, I'm really poor. I can't afford an attorney. Can you appoint one for me?" And the trial court basically said, "No." I have the quote here in the actual court case. So I'm just going to quote the exchange between the judge and the defendant, which is Mr. Gideon. So the court, quote, "Mr. Gideon, I am sorry, but I cannot appoint counsel to represent you in this case. Under the laws of the state of Florida, the only time the court can appoint counsel to represent a defendant is when the person is charged with a capital offense. I am sorry, but I will have to deny your request to appoint counsel to defend you in this case." The defendant said, quote, "The United States Supreme Court says I am entitled to be represented by counsel," end quote. So at trial, Gideon represented himself. He made the opening statement. He examined witnesses, cross-examined witnesses. From research, it appears that he did a pretty decent job representing himself, or what could be considered a decent job for not having any counsel. The jury still found him guilty, and he was sentenced to 5 years of prison. So he felt he was wronged. So he filed a petition for writ of habeas corpus in the Florida Supreme Court. And if you don't know what habeas corpus is, habeas corpus is defined as, by Google, a writ requiring a person under arrest to be brought forth before a judge or into court, especially to secure the person's release unless lawful grounds are shown for their detention. So basically, habeas corpus is when someone can report unlawful detention or imprisonment caused by a court. The Florida Supreme Court denied Gideon's petition. So the next step for him, he went directly to the United States Supreme Court. The court agreed to hear the case in order to resolve the question of whether the right to counsel under the Sixth Amendment applies to defendants in state court without a capital offense. So the two amendments that the courts were looking at were the Sixth Amendment, which is as stated, "In all criminal prosecutions, the accused shall enjoy the right to a speedy and public trial by an impartial jury of the state and district wherein the crime shall have been committed, which district shall have been previously ascertained by law, and to be informed of the nature and cause of the accusation, to be confronted with the witnesses against him, to have compulsory process for obtaining witnesses in his favor, and to have the assistance of counsel for his defense." So that's the one of the amendments that the court was looking at. That's pretty much the amendment that states everyone has the right to a fair trial. In the end, the court held that the Sixth Amendment's guarantee of counsel is a fundamental right given to them by the Bill of Rights in the Constitution. As a result of coming to that conclusion, they overturned a previous decision, in the case Betts versus Brady, which held that the refusal to appoint counsel for a defendant charged with a felony or like a capital offense didn't violate the due process of the 14th Amendment, which is the other amendment that the court was looking at here. I'm just going to read the first section. Section 1, quote, all persons born are naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States. Nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. So let's go back to my notes here. The Supreme Court found that his right was taken away, I guess. So that kind of sucks. So that's the last case. I think the camera moved again. So in conclusion, how all these court cases were able to kind of coincide with the power of judicial review. In the first case, Marbury versus Madison established the power of judicial review, is what started it all. The Cohens versus the state of Virginia was what expanded it a little bit, stating that not only can we declare stuff or statutes unconstitutional, but we can also hear any cases that have constitutional questions. So it kind of just expanded the jurisdiction a little bit for the Supreme Court to hear decided cases. And Gideon versus Wainwright showed the Supreme Court's power to overturn a lower court's decision and declared previous actions as unconstitutional, saying that the right was waived when it shouldn't have been. So all these cases were like turning points in history for the courts. Hopefully I get a good grade on this. The cases particularly were really long, and reading them was hard, but I was able to come up with a decent summary of what happened, like some historical background. It was fun. I hope you enjoyed listening to me talk about judicial review. I probably mispronounced words here and there because law language it's kind of hopefully Landon didn't speak into the mic or anything, because I don't know, he doesn't typically do that. But Landon, if you're here somewhere, please leave. So now I'm gonna end it right here. It was fun talking to you. I hope you guys have a good rest of the week. I hope you guys have a happy holidays. Merry Christmas if you celebrate Christmas. Happy Hanukkah if you're Jewish. I'm blanking on every other holiday that's in December. So I apologize, but happy holidays. Hope everyone has a good time. And treat people with kindness. Well, see ya.